Obviously, every week, these players move up and down this list based off matchups, based off usage trends. But I've actually had to add a considerable amount of new names to this list in comparison to what you have seen over the past few weeks. Now, obviously, the S tier names of Puka Nacua and Jackson Smith and Jigba, they're not new to you. They're incredible. They've been incredible all year long. You have Puka Nacua at 23.1 points per game, JSN at 22.1. Not really worried about either matchup. You do have Shaheed going over to Seattle, but to be honest with you, I don't think it matters. Now, moving over to our A tier, we are going to have Amon-Ra St. Brown leading us off, who's currently averaging about 20.5 fantasy points per game. And this matchup against Washington, it's not scary at all. You have an implied team total of 28.5 points for the Detroit Lions. So the Lions actually do currently project to be the highest scoring team in the NFL this week. Then Justin Jefferson will be our next wide receiver with McCarthy coming back in. You're a little bit concerned about what this offense looked like, what the target share would be, but he did have 39% of the Minnesota Vikings targets this past week with JJ McCarthy, and he's actually at a target share of 30.9% so far this season, which is the number one mark of his NFL career. So the big issue that you've had with Jefferson is not the usage, but instead just the offense hasn't been great. But this week you have an implied team total of 23 points against the Baltimore Ravens. This game has an over-under of almost 50, so there should be a considerable amount of pass attempts here in Minnesota. Then with Egbuka, I am making this ranking under the assumption that Chris Godwin's not going to play this week, and even if Godwin did, I really don't know if it matters much. Egbuka had a very bad stretch of games in weeks 6, 7, and 8, and I think a lot of this had to do with the fact that you get the hamstring injury in week 6. He's initially reported that he's going to be out a decent amount of time. He surprises everybody by coming back week 7. I think he just clearly wasn't 100%, but now he is 4 weeks removed from that injury because he's coming off the week 9 bye. And you currently do have an implied team total of 25.5 points for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense against the New England Patriots. And this game has an over-under of 48.5. Now, looking at Drake London, you can make an argument to put London much higher, but the thing is, we just got to be realistic. You've had these crazy high spike weeks where we saw him with 38.8 points against the Patriots this past week, 31.8 points against the Buffalo Bills. But you've also had a couple duds where you go back against the Minnesota Vikings where he scored 5.9 and the Carolina Panthers where he scored 10.5. So the ceiling's crazy high. The floor hasn't exactly been there. This game is at Indianapolis though, so it is getting played in the Dome. So should be excited for that reason. Now, moving over to B tier, we are going to have Davante Adams. With Adams, he's been incredible with his touchdown rate this season. Like right now, the yardage total is not super impressive. He's averaging 61 receiving yards per game, which is actually the lowest mark that we have seen since year 2 of his NFL career. But he is averaging a touchdown a game right now, which obviously is very high in the second highest mark we've ever seen from him. So 9 times out of 10, when you see this unsustainable touchdown rate, it should come back down to earth, but you really should like the matchup here against the Niners. You have an implied team total of 27 points. Now, our next name is going to be Michael Pittman Jr. You have an implied team total of 27.5 points here for Pittman. Pittman's averaging 16.2 fantasy points per game. We keep talking about, oh my gosh, he's going to get hit with touchdown regression, blah, blah, blah. Well, we actually just saw this team go through and allow Daniel Jones to have 50 dropbacks this past game. I mean, y'all know we've gone with the higher than on the yardage mark for Michael Pittman in back-to-back weeks. And after coming off 3 games with more than 55.5 receiving yards, Underdog Fantasy is still keeping his higher, lower receiving yards at 55.5, and they are putting him unlikely to score a touchdown. Now, of course, if you wanted to take Michael Pittman Jr. to score a touchdown, higher, lower, 55.5 receiving yards, you can do so on Underdog Fantasy. Link will be in the description. It'll be in the comment section. Use code FLOCK and you'll get $100 after you play your first 5. Plus, on top of that, you will get a gimme Ashton Genty pick for that Thursday night game. And code FLOCK will get you free questions that you can ask in the live streams that I'm live streaming every single night until Christmas. You can find that link to Underdog Fantasy in the description and comment section, and Underdog's available in almost every single state. Now, our next name is going to be Zay Flowers. With Zay Flowers, really good offense now that you have Lamar Jackson back in. Well, yeah, it was maybe a little bit disappointing where he came through and he only had 11.5 fantasy points this past week. That was in a game in which the tight ends in Baltimore got absolutely everything. Are we expecting that to be the case forever and in the future? Most likely not. I would assume that Mark Andrews doesn't continue to score 2 touchdowns every 3 targets that he has. Then Courtland Sutton will be our next wide receiver. Sutton's had some pretty down weeks as of late, which has actually dragged down his fantasy points per game to only 13.5. But this is going to be a really nice matchup that you have going up against the Raiders. I still want to believe that he is the wide receiver 1 here over Troy Franklin, but you'll see in a second that Franklin's moving up our rankings dramatically. We're a lot higher on Courtland Sutton this week than we were last week, just because the Raiders matchup is a lot better than the Texans matchup was. You actually have the implied team total for 26 points here for Denver, where last week it was only like 18.5. Now, moving over to Devonta Smith, we are in week 10 and Devonta Smith is averaging 2 more points per game than A.J. Brown has so far this year. So it'd be tough for me to rank A.J. Brown ahead of Smith at this point. He's been the wide receiver 15 in points per game. The difficulty that I'm going to have with this is it is a tough matchup going up against the Green Bay Packers, where you are actually going to be looking at an implied team total of only 21.5 points here for Philly. Then going over to Ladd McConkey, the usage trends really strong, but the underlying problem is you have Quentin Johnston, you have Keenan Allen, you have Gadsden. So you have 4 names here that realistically need to look to get the ball. Now, also at the same time, you are seeing a really good matchup here against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Ladd McConkey, probably somebody that you have to play, where if you are looking at the raw targets he's had, I mean, he is sitting with about 10 targets a game over the past month. I actually just traded away Rome Odunze in the Flock League. You will see that in the new Flock League video that will come out God knows when. But he's coming off a game with 0 fantasy points where you had the Chicago Bears scoring almost 50 total points. Absolutely crazy. However, Rome's still averaging 13.5. I mean, this is an offense that still projects to be very good. Like, for reference, you were seeing the Bears project to score 4 more points than the Philadelphia Eagles this week. So I think I would put Rome like right there in the same line as A.J. Brown. I still do believe that he is very easily the wide receiver 1. But if Loveland is going to take that step forward, that could result in Rome's target share going down. Now, moving over to Nico Collins. Nico Collins still on my team, still planning on starting him this week, but it does look like this week you are not going to have CJ Stroud, and instead it is going to be Davis Mills. You can kind of tell with that just based off the implied team total here only being 18 points. Typically, you have decent projections for the Houston Texans, but this week it should get very ugly. Then going over and looking at Jalen Waddle, I may or may not have just traded for Waddle. It is a disaster in Miami, but you are just getting guaranteed volume. Like if we look at weeks 5 through 9, he's had 9 targets, 8 targets, 4 targets, 6 targets, 9 targets. I mean, at the same time, his points per game mark so far this season is 13.8 against the Buffalo Bills. They're going to be trailing by a decent margin. I actually misspoke saying that the Lions project to be the highest scoring offense in the league because Buffalo has an implied team total of 30 points. The spread on this game is about 9.5. But the over-under is over 50, and sportsbooks have an implied team total of 20.5 points for the Miami Dolphins this week, which is only 1 point less than what they have for Philly. Going over and looking at Chris Olave, typically we had seen the Saints project outscore like 21-ish points with Spencer Rattler. Tyler Shuck is just much worse, and I will say it's a decent matchup going up against the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers are favored in this game by about 5.5 points. You have no Shaheed, so Olave's target share is just going to be through the roof as it already has been, where he's averaging 28.7% of his team's targets. But issue is this projects to be the second to worst offense in the league this week. Then going over to Deebo Samuel, decent projections here, surprisingly, against the Detroit Lions. Despite you not having Jaden Daniels, you have an implied team total of 21 points here for the Commanders with Marcus Mariota. You've already had Terry McLaurin ruled out, so even if this offense is going to be worse than it would have been with Jaden Daniels, Deebo Samuel is still probably a must-start wide receiver. Going over to Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson is turning into a must-start wide receiver just given how well Jackson Dart's playing. Like, this is a receiver that over the past 5 or so games, you've had no Malik Neighbors, he's averaging about 7-8 targets a contest. And right now the Giants project to score 21 points. That's more than the Cardinals. That's more than the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's more than the Texans. It's more than the Saints. It's more than the Dolphins. It's more than every other wide receiver in this tier outside of Stephon Diggs, who will be our next guy. But the Patriots only project to score 2 more points than the New York Giants this week. If we're going to go ahead and look at Diggs, he's been very efficient from a route perspective. 2.45 yards per route run is significantly higher than what you had in 2024, than what you had in 2023. 9.6 yards per target is higher than any mark that you've had since his final season as a Minnesota Viking. But the issue with Stephon Diggs is he's just not getting on the field enough. But this week, that may be better because this week specifically, probably have no Kayshon Boutte. If Boutte does play the New England Patriots receivers, you'll see us rank them later on. We'll probably also have to move down our rankings. Now, DK Metcalf is going to be in my starting lineup this week. He'll be my wide receiver 3. I think he'll be my second flex spot. With Metcalf, I've been concerned all year just because the target volume hasn't been consistent. You have not had a single game with 10 targets. He is averaging a career low targets per game, receptions per game. The only thing that's been saving him is the touchdowns. But when the touchdowns go away, how they did this past week, it's horrible. Like in the games in which DK Metcalf has not scored a touchdown, he has scored 12.3, 8, and 2.6 fantasy points. Marvin Harrison will be our next wide receiver. Marv is actually probably better off with Jacoby Brissett under center in comparison to Kyler Murray. And if he's not better off, it's just a neutral swap. But this matchup specifically is going to be in Seattle. You do have an implied team total of 19.5 points for the Arizona Cardinals. And if you looked at projections last week, they had the Cardinals up scoring close to like 27 points. So it was a very easy spot to say, well, you know what? You should probably plan on starting Marvin Harrison because it's a great matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. This matchup is just so much tougher to get excited for. Now, going over to Romeo Doubs, you're currently averaging 13 fantasy points per game. And at the same time, now you probably have no Matthew Golden this week. You definitely have no Tucker Kraft this week. So if we are looking at Doubs, like the target share is going to go up. I don't love the matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. This game has an over-under of only 45.5 points. But the target share is going to go higher. And obviously, he is a very solid red zone weapon for Jordan Love. Now, Tedero McMillan, I keep on wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt, but this team just will not throw the ball. And even when they do, it's not super efficient. Now, I will say from like a dynasty's perspective, from like a talent perspective, still a massive believer in Tedero McMillan because hell, I mean, at the end of the day, he's having a 26.1% team target share, 1.9 yards per route run. Like these are incredible numbers for a wide receiver. Just the issue is it's with Bryce Young. This matchup against the New Orleans Saints is one of the very few matchups where you can confidently say the Panthers probably will win the game and they'll probably just go out there and run the ball over and over again. Now going over to Khalil Shakir here, for him to go up against the Miami Dolphins, obviously this is a team that he has played a considerable amount. Earlier in the season, he goes out, scores the touchdown, but only has 4 targets. Last season, he had 2 games. He scored 10.5 and 11 points. In 2023, he scored 0 as well as 16.5. The big issue that you have for any Bills wide receiver against the Miami Dolphins will be that they're probably able to just go out there and run the ball over and over and over again and not really have to ask Josh Allen to drop back. So if I'm looking at this, that would concern me about the overall passing volume. But right now, you do have the Bills projected out to be the highest scoring team in the league this week, and Shakir is their number one target earner. Now, Jordan Addison is currently averaging 14.5 fantasy points per game. We just have to be very real where you see McCarthy come in and Addison has a total of 2 receptions and 4 targets. Against the Chargers, he had 4 targets. So if this offense isn't going to be great and you have a dominant alpha like Justin Jefferson taking 30% of this team's target share and TJ Hawkinson can score touchdowns, realistically, you just have to lower expectations in general. With a player like Jordan Addison, it would be different if he was in a much better offense. Going over and looking at Quentin Johnston, he helps my Underdog best ball teams. He keeps doing it. I mean, if y'all look up our results in those Underdog best ball drafts right now, I mean, we are just crushing this season. 7-2 in the Flock League, crushing Underdog drafts. It's been a beautiful year. But Quentin Johnston's been a big reason for that in these best ball drafts. My most drafted player. I mean, y'all know there's nobody I'm rooting for more. But if we're going to be real with each other, the usage is just going in the wrong direction. We have not had double-digit targets since week 4. I mean, in the first month of the season, he was averaging about 9 targets a game. And since then, I mean, he's averaging about 5. Just the emergence of Gadsden is making him and Keenan Allen way less reliable. We will have Keenan Allen down here in these ranks as well. Then going over to DJ Moore, this ranking is going to be subject to change, and it depends on if you have Luther Burden playing or not. But honestly, even with no Luther Burden this past week, well, you did have crazy high points for DJ Moore where he scored 23 points. That was a season high. His previous season high was only 12.8. A big reason for this was the fact that you had the gimmicky passing touchdown to Caleb Williams, and ultimately DJ Moore still only had 6 targets. So if Luther Burden's back in, I would rank him lower, and I'd probably move Rome Odunze down as well. Alec Pierce will be our next wide receiver. Alec Pierce getting a massive jump up. You have no Adonai Mitchell. He actually comes through, and over the past 3 weeks, he's averaging about 8-9 targets a game. And you just had 115 receiving yards. Like realistically, he's averaging a career high 71.5 receiving yards this season, a career high 20% team target share, a career high 2.33 yards per route run. And if the touchdown ever gets there for Alec Pierce, it can be that much better. Now moving over to Trey Tucker. Trey Tucker is now the locked and loaded wide receiver 1 for the Raiders. Is it going to matter? Probably not, because you actually do currently see the Las Vegas Raiders projecting to be the worst offense in the NFL this week. It's a tough matchup against Denver, and Trey Tucker has been very much unreliable. And the real number 1 target, of course, is now going to be a Mr. Brock Bowers. Now, Juwan Jennings will be our next wide receiver. Jennings, every week that goes by, he's getting healthier and healthier. You just see him set a season high from his earlier injury, 14.1 fantasy points. He scored the touchdown 3 straight weeks. He's had at least 5 targets, and we're assuming that you have no Ricky Pearsall yet again this week. Now, Troy Franklin will be our next wide receiver. Franklin's steaming in the right direction for sure, where if you're looking at what we have from a target share perspective, he's up at over 21% of the Denver Broncos targets, and this matchup against the Raiders is a solid one, where again, you actually do have them favored by about 9.5 points. Then Jacoby Myers, I'm going to throw here in these rankings. I'm going to have to just make sure we keep our ear to the ground and figure out, is Myers actually going to be playing this weekend? If he doesn't play, Parker Washington will be an option. If Myers does play, he still won't be that exciting, just given the fact it's a brutal matchup having to play against the Houston Texans. Jameson Williams is a wide receiver that I understand he's coming off a big week, but we have seen this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again with Jameson Williams, that you're going to get these one-off standalone weeks where you get a touchdown, you get a big play, and all of a sudden he looks exciting, where in reality, it's just his role in the offense to not necessarily go through and, dominate the target share, but stretch NFL defenses, create space underneath for the tight end, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and the running backs. So I wouldn't rely on them. The matchup against Washington shouldn't pose a struggle because, again, you do have the Lions projected to be the second highest scoring team in the league this week. I'm going over to Christian Watson. Christian Watson does look to get a bump up because you have no Tucker Kraft. And on top of that, you go ahead and look at the fact that Matthew Golden may be missing. And hell, I mean, at this point, you are currently sitting with him coming off a game where he played 66% of the snaps, which was a season high for Christian Watson. Jerry Jeudy, I went ahead and I dropped in the Flock League, I want to say last week. I just picked up like a handcuff running back for, I think, Tank Bigsby because I have Saquon Barkley and I didn't know if Barkley was going to be hurt or not. And there's no part of me that ever wants to start Jerry Jeudy again, but this game against the New York Jets could be interesting because I don't know if y'all saw what happened on Tuesday, but it very much does appear that the New York Jets have given up. They are no longer playing for anything. And with that in mind, all of a sudden, their defense is one that we can actually attack. The Cleveland Browns have an implied team total of 20 points. Now, moving over to our next name with Christian Kirk. This would be a better spot if you had CJ Stroud. It's going to be a revenge game for Christian Kirk. He played 55% of the snaps his first week back, but he did see 8 targets. Then Josh Downs, in my mind, is just an extremely unreliable play. Of course, if you're looking at the setup like last week where Daniel Jones had 50 dropbacks, Josh Downs could get there, but Josh Downs has fallen across the board this season, an 18% team target share in comparison to 25% the year prior. I mean, he's fallen from 2.2 yards per route run to 1.7. He's fallen from 57 receiving yards per game down to 39. So it just doesn't look reliable. Shaheed, no idea if he's going to be playing against the Cardinals. I will say, surprisingly, you have the Seattle Seahawks projected out to be one of the better offenses in the league this week against Arizona with an implied team total of 26 points. Obviously, this will be a ranking that's in flux that we'll have to keep up to date later in the week. So if you're not already, just subscribe to the channel. I'll be live streaming every single night, answering your questions. And also you can always find these rankings on flockfantasy.com. Going over to Tez Johnson, we're making the ranking under the assumption that you have both no Chris Godwin as well as no Mike Evans. Now, obviously, we know for pretty much 100% fact that Mike Evans won't be playing, but who knows? Maybe, just maybe Chris Godwin's out there. But again, like I said previously with Igbuka, not sure if it would make that big of a difference regardless. Keon Coleman just looks like a certified bum. I don't know how you could ever trust him against the Chiefs this past week. He had 2 targets. Like, realistically, there's a good shot that you need to go through and you need to put in Darius Slayton over Keon Coleman, where if you are looking at Darius Slayton, all of a sudden he is the clear wide receiver 2. This is an offense in which they project out well against the Chicago Bears. Jackson Dart looks really good. And then DeMario Douglas, this ranking is under the assumption that you have no Kayshon Boutte. He had the 100 receiving yards and the receiving touchdown this past week. But what would be more interesting is seeing, can he go out there and play more than 30% of this team's snaps? Because he just does not see the field. Now, looking at Calvin Austin obviously missed time earlier in the season, but he's had back-to-back games with 6 targets. This team just doesn't really use their wide receivers. You haven't had a single week with more than 6 targets for Calvin Austin, which is hilarious because Olamide Zaccheaus has had a total of 5 games with 6 or more targets. So the volume's more consistent there. This ranking will be in flux again, depending on what we have with the Luther Burden situation. Kendrick Bourne, I'm making this ranking under the assumption you have no Pearsall. Darnell Mooney is averaging 4.9 fantasy points per game this season. Honestly, he shouldn't even be in these rankings. Xavier Legette's averaging 7.2. I would love if Legette did anything and anything at all to continue to help my best ball teams. But in reality, that one decent week we got is probably going to be it. Malik Washington just does not look good. I know the volume has been there. He's had 1 game this season with double-digit fantasy points. And Rashad Bateman also does not look good. He's only had 1 game this season with double-digit points. But let me know if y'all have anything down in the comment section. Be happy to check it out for you. And of course, If you wanted to check out any of those higher lowers, you can on Underdog Fantasy. Links in the description. It's in the comment section. Code FLOCK will get you $100 added to your account after you play your first 5. Plus, you'll get a Gimme Ashton Genty pick, higher, lower, half a total yard for that Thursday night game, and free questions that you can ask me in the live streams. And I'm live streaming every single night until Christmas, answering your fantasy football questions. Underdog Fantasy is available in almost every single state. You can find that link in the description as well as the comment section. But much love, ladies and gentlemen. Really appreciate you, and really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.